Every day, complex global supply chains converge on the UK, delivering the constant volume of goods required to feed the population and stock domestic markets. To ease the passage of some of these goods, the UK government has proposed a reset with the European Union, a political initiative intended to reduce cross-channel trade friction. The physical mechanism driving this friction relies on SPS, or sanitary and phytosanitary controls. These are the mandatory border inspections designed to prevent the introduction of plant and animal diseases. The proposed reset contains a strict mathematical paradox. To align with European SPS rules, the UK is required to adopt the EU's protectionist control model against all imports arriving from the rest of the world. Implementing this model dismantles the UK's established post-Brexit risk-based border regime, replacing targeted biosecurity logic with rigid blanket compliance. The impact lands directly on highly optimized sectors like fresh produce and cut flower markets, where inventory turnover is measured in hours, not weeks. These specific supply chains have absorbed the operational costs of shifting UK border models, repeated government delays, and contradictory policy guidance since 2020. Applying a foreign protectionist framework breaks down a domestic supply network that has already been redesigned to operate with minimal friction. This regulatory shift immediately threatens the viable sourcing of highly compliant, non-EU fresh produce that British consumers rely on year-round. A macro-level policy explicitly designed to reduce friction for European goods objectively triggers massive, unavoidable operational bottlenecks across the rest of the global supply chain. We can measure the precise cost of this transition by looking at the UK's current post-2024 risk-based model, which applies specific easements to fresh produce imports. Under this existing framework, European fresh produce hasn't been subjected to UK border controls since Brexit. Simultaneously, the rest of world goods arriving under UK SPS measures achieve compliance of over 99.5%. Small wholesalers importing fractional quantities of seasonal produce lack the margins to absorb these new inspection fees and bureaucratic overheads. When rules require up to 100% of consignments to be held at the border for official visual inspections, the immediate result is an inescapable labour bottleneck and continuous transit delay. The government has published no comprehensive benefit analysis to justify replacing a functioning risk-based model with this system. The EU reset does not eliminate red tape. It transfers it, multiplies it, and applies it directly to the global trade routes that keep the domestic market solvent. FPC, representing the operators who actually manage these imports, has mapped the government's macroeconomic claims against hard operational data. The government's first claim is that businesses will save money. The data shows the opposite. Blindly aligning to EU rules imposes severe, totally avoidable on-costs for members who import from both the EU and the rest of the world. The second claim suggests that fresh produce will reach supermarkets more quickly. But, because the 2024 plant health easements already removed border friction for edible produce, delivery times are already optimized. Adding mandatory 5 to 100% check rates introduces friction where none currently exists. The physical maths of holding vehicles for physical inspection guarantees a cascading failure at the point of entry. We have localized evidence of this. Facilities like the Sevington Inland Border Facility have experienced severe operational difficulties and IT failures since opening, proving the fragility of centralizing inspections. The third claim asserts the agreement will ease pressure on consumer food inflation. Yet direct supply chain costs, mandatory government inspection fees, and the commercial penalty of ruined, delayed produce act as a direct multiplier on retail food prices. Beyond the physical logistics, the administrative processes for implementing these changes demands impossible turnarounds from the industry. In its call for information, the government gave businesses exactly 33 days, including the Easter break, to conduct a complete gap analysis between GB and EU legislation and forecast the operational impact. Operators are expected to benchmark their entire supply chain while managing record energy prices and international shipping disruptions. When policy is drafted without impact assessments and consultation windows ignore operational reality, the resulting framework is entirely disconnected from the physical requirements of the agri-food sector. Blanket regulatory alignment forces a single standard onto a bifurcated market. FPC proposes a studied solution, a decoupled supply chain model. Goods are sorted at origin based on destination. Path A routes produce for UK consumption through existing risk-based standards, bypassing the EU filter. Path B diverts European exports through a targeted compliance gateway, satisfying EU standards. The routing logic dictates that standards of supply chains goods strictly meet the requirements of the receiving country. This clever architecture maximizes frictionless trade with the EU for dedicated exporters, while preserving the highly compliant, zero-delay inbound lanes from the rest of the world. Supply chain resilience requires granular risk-based data to govern border friction. It cannot be achieved through political slogans. If the government ignores this targeted architecture, the domestic businesses and the end consumers will carry the financial penalty of the resulting gridlock. Willfully importing border friction and dismantling efficient global supply routes in exchange for a political reset is a direct act of economic self-harm. Before demanding industry compliance, the government must provide an honest legislative cross-map detailing exactly how EU integration alters existing domestic standards. A genuine negotiation must strengthen cross-channel exports without paralyzing the global supply routes that keep our country fed. Every day of the year,